Good morning. Well, here we are, the last of the heptalogy. It's been a wild ride, and I'm happy with the result. There won't be an eighth. The last one was written somewhere around about 2018, so I can't go back in time to write anymore. I think it's done. And I'm quite happy with the result. When I started book one, I had no idea that I would continue writing the next six. Something that I suspected another author might have done, but we won't go into that. Do you like my new book cabinet? Went up over the weekend. Not too sure whether I like it there or not. I might move it. Used to be here, but now they're here. Not too sure whether I like it or not. I'm having a change round at the moment. Anywho, waffling. Oh well, books 1 to 7, A Romp in Time. That's it for that anyway, but there's plenty more time travel stories to come. But I've just looked on my little list now, and apart from one or two other stories, the next series to come is the Miriam series, which consists of 11 books. And again, they are scattered throughout the library, as I'm now calling it. But I will be doing those again, one after each other, instead of having to wait throughout this for a very long time. I'm not very good at this, am I? I'm terrible at this. I'm not a very good orator. And so I will be doing the Miriam series one after each other every other day. They were popular in their day, especially Holloway, which is, in fact, the Miriam series, they were responsible for my 6 bestsellers. So I'm looking forward to putting those out there, especially Holloway, which was the first one to be written. Anyway, I'll talk more about that when they come up. But for the time being, here we are, A Romp in Time, or as it used to be called, Alien Queen 7. But A Romp in Time, the ending. Good luck. Bye.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to tear through the source material that serves as the definitive final chapter of one of the most remarkable chronicles ever written.
We are, quite literally, closing the book on an incredible journey.
That's right. For those of you who have followed the saga, this is it. This is our deep dive into the conclusion of the A Romp in Time Chronicles. The material we're looking at is the 7th and final volume.
And it brings the main group's era of time-hopping adventures to a dramatic and really a permanent halt.
We're not just looking at the ultimate fate of their extraordinary time travel technology, but I think more importantly, the immense personal and moral cost that 16 years of manipulating history extracted.
Exactly. I mean, these are individuals who have dodged mortality, dodged consequences across centuries. And now, finally, here in 2035, they're just forced to confront a very messy, very painful reality.
And what becomes obvious, right from the first page, is the shift in focus. The narrator, Molly, she points it out herself.
She does. It's a profound shift. In the earlier volumes, she specifically mentions book 2, the story was almost all about the mechanics, the incidents of time travel.
The adventure.
The adventures. But here, in this conclusion, Molly notes that the ratio of actual time jumps to the group's personal, internal, and psychological problems is just completely reversed.
So the story isn't about when they go anymore.
No. It's about who they are now.
It sounds like the cosmos finally issued them a massive overdue therapy bill. And for us, for you listening, you really need to put on your thinking caps. This final volume revisits some painful, unsolved issues.
Especially the really dark moral dilemmas from A Romp in Time.
Yeah.
Treachery, betrayal, and vindictiveness. It's all about consequence.
Exactly, consequence.
And that consequence really begins with the chronicler herself.
So let's start with Molly, the writer, the scribe, who documented all of this for us. At the start of this final book, she faces a crisis that just completely shatters her entire perspective on life.
It's a truly defining moment for her character. And it brings the sheer life-saving privilege of living in the 21st century into stark relief.
So it's late January 2035. Molly's visiting her friend Daisy at her bookshop in Lyme Regis.
She sets the scene so perfectly. Lunch overlooking the cobs, she'd ordered a seafood platter. And then she just feels this moment of overwhelming giddiness, and then nothing.
Just gone.
Unconscious for 20 hours. It was a minor stroke.
And the immediate aftermath, it says so much about who she is at her core. When she wakes up, Mary's there, but she can't speak.
She has to use a little chalkboard, which she found intensely frustrating.
Yeah.
But the thing she focuses on is this immense relief she felt when she realized she could still write.
Her hands still worked.
Right. Her ability to write, to type, even to do her gardening was unaffected. And she says if those anchors had been compromised, she would have just plunged straight into depression.
That ability to write is the entire foundation of these chronicles, isn't it? Losing her voice but keeping her pen must have felt like some kind of cosmic loophole.
A week later, she's discharged in a wheelchair. And she gets this serious warning from her consultant, Mr. Bradley, to take 3 to 6 months of absolute rest.
And this is where we get that little anecdote that just reveals how ingrained time travel is in her subconscious.
Oh, it's so telling. As Mary is signing the discharge papers, Molly scribbles a joke on her chalkboard to the consultant.
What does she write?
She asks if it would be acceptable to travel into the future to get some more advanced drugs.
Even then, in that moment of complete vulnerability, her first thought is a temporal fix.
And Mary, he laughs too loudly to cover her confusion, tells Mr. Bradley it's just a nervous joke. But the recovery was anything but fun.
Her speech came back relatively quickly, but the psychological fallout was profound.
Absolutely. She talks about struggling with memory recall, where words are constantly on the tip of her tongue, but just out of reach. But the biggest struggle was this paralyzing anxiety.
Fear of a second stroke.
Yes, her nerve left her, as she puts it. She was deeply uncomfortable being alone in the house.
So she had to embrace technology she probably would have scoffed at before. Mary gets her this sophisticated 24-hour monitoring app for her watch.
Right, the kind of thing that can automatically call for help, give her exact location if her vitals change. It's the ultimate security blanket for someone who used to just jump 100 years to solve a problem.
And this anxiety, it latches onto another specific area, her medicine.
It does. She develops a mild but, really taxing form of OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, specifically around timing her medication doses perfectly.
So she has to get therapy for it.
A 12-week course of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, just to manage that one specific anxiety. You see, Molly, this intrepid chronicler of centuries, brought back down to earth, managing her life with modern psychological methods.
But what really resonates, I think, is the brutal self-reflection this forces on her, connecting her all the way back to her 1801 origins.
It is a profound, chilling realization. Molly is so explicit about it. She says if she'd been living in her original time, 1801, she believes she would have died almost instantly.
Or at least within a year.
A dreadful year, with minimal care. And her exact brutal conclusion is, I think I would have died lying in my own muck.
Wow.
Her survival in 2035 underlines this stark moral obligation she now feels towards the modern life she'd almost taken for granted.
That shift in perspective, from being a master of time to just a grateful patient, it really sets a heavy tone for the rest of the book.
It really does. And it leads us immediately to the most tragic arc in this final volume, the story of Rose.
And the crushing moral burden of a rescue that, at the end of the day, completely failed.
Rose, the girl plucked from the 1800s. She's 13 but looked closer to 10 after years of just awful treatment by Vil, his brother, and Madame Caroline.
And Molly originally rescued her because she thought Rose might be her own sister. Then the DNA results proved otherwise, and Molly just sinks into this deep depression.
And that depression, that initial distance from Molly, it just poisoned the well from the start. Mary had to step in, speak very harshly to Molly, telling her to stop treating Rose like a stranger in the house who won't go away.
But by then it was too late. Rose's basic survivalist, troubled personality was already set in stone.
Her lack of adjustment is heartbreaking. I mean, the details are so specific. She was horrified by modern clothes, jeans, trainers. She'd reflexively use her hands to cover her groin and bottom, like she was expecting a blow,
And crucially, she was convinced her stay in 2035 was temporary.
which led to this reckless, unruly behavior because she thought, well, none of it matters in the long run anyway.
Which brings us to the infamous Seagull incident, a perfect example of the depth of her trauma.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Harry witnesses Rose on the beach, deliberately trying to kill a seagull, pressing it into the sand with her shoe.
And when Harry tries to stop her, she shoves him violently into a rock pool. He cuts his forehead. Molly, at first, she doubts Harry.
But his account was so steadfast, so truthful. Molly noted his chin didn't wobble. It forced her to accept the brutality of what Rose was capable of.
By Christmas 2034, the situation had just become completely unsustainable. Molly and Mary admit they had lost all control.
Rose was stealing money, and not just a little. She was incredibly disruptive, tearing pictures out of books at Daisy's shop. And physically, she'd changed.
She'd grown 18 centimeters, become lean and tough, and was constantly in fights at school with girls and boys. They knew the authorities were about to step in.
And then came the devastating climax.
The pregnancy.
The discovery of her pregnancy. She was just months from giving birth. And this forced them to confront her extreme anxiety around any kind of medical appointment. It was so overwhelming she'd have these physical fits where her bowels came loose.
They had to sedate her.
And during one scan, she bit a nurse's nose. The police had to get involved. I mean, the tension was just astronomical.
But the deeper revelation, the one that really exposed the core failure of Molly's rescue, was about her anger.
Yes. Rose reveals that she'd overheard Molly discussing the DNA results and was devastated she wasn't her sister. But worse.
Worse, she was convinced that William McBarry was her father. She'd overheard conversations back in the 1800s and felt that Molly had stolen her from her true parent.
So Molly's initial, maybe selfish desire for a sister, followed by her emotional distance. It all just led to this ultimate failure. She didn't save Rose.
She just transferred her from one hell to another, a modern one where she felt betrayed and completely rootless.
So in early 2035, right before Molly's stroke, Rose gets sent to Anne and Stewart in London. It's a last desperate hope.
And on the journey, she's quiet, resigned, and she just chillingly declares she doesn't care for the baby growing inside her.
And, the former Queen of England, she really tries to connect with her on this primal level. She shares her own story of being saved by Vah and Stewart.
But Rose's trauma had built this impenetrable wall of cynicism. She just shows fear and disbelief, and then she delivers that devastating line.
Nobody does something for nothing.
And that conversation leads to the darkest revelation of all.
Rose confesses that she'd been prostituting herself since she was about 9 or 10 years old.
Just heartbreaking. Anne is horrified, and she tries so desperately to assure her that things are different now, that nothing is wanted in return. But Rose just repeats it.
I don't believe you. Nobody does something for nothing.
Her distrust meant the move was never going to work. After only 5 days, she runs away.
But Stewart had the foresight to anticipate it. He'd had a dry cleaner sew his name and address into all her new clothes. It paid off. The police found her sleeping on a park bench and brought her back.
She remains unruly until she finally gives birth to a daughter, Violet.
And this is where the true extent of the psychological damage is laid bare. Rose shows absolutely zero maternal feelings.
She won't hold her, won't feed her. Stewart only recalls her even looking at the baby twice in 3 days.
So the group, facing this impossible choice between modern prison for her or the hell of the 1800s, they lean towards sending her back. They're terrified her behavior will expose them.
And Vah is so reluctant to risk the traveler, which is already showing signs of distress. But Anne, just consumed by anguish over their failure, needs closure.
So she decides to search the National Archives. She spends 3 solid days looking for any records on Rose McBarry and Vull.
And what she finds completely redefines the moral weight of their decision.
The first finding is from the Old Bailey records, 1813. Rose, the daughter, appears in court to speak for her father, William McBarry Vull, who was charged with stealing shoes.
He was convicted, sentenced to 5 years hard labor. It confirms the truth of her childhood.
But the second finding from 1818 is the real tragedy. A coroner's report. William McBarry, living in King's Cross with Rose, took her life and then cut his own throat.
She was only 20.
20 years old. And both were buried in unconsecrated soil at Bun Hill Fields, which is, the most incredible dark irony.
It's the same place Molly Thompson was buried in that prior erased timeline.
The agony for Anne and Stewart. It must have been crushing. And just screamed. They didn't just abandon Rose, they took her to her death.
They prolonged a hellish life only to deposit her right back into the timeline that led directly to her murder.
Anne's immediate reaction is to beg Vah, go back, reverse it. But this is where Vah, the keeper of the temporal gates, draws a very hard line.
She refuses, cites the instability of the traveler, the risk of causing more harm in 2035. Her words were just sharp. She's dead. She's been dead for 217 years. We can't risk it.
And that's a fascinating moral contradiction we see emerging, isn't it?
How so?
Well, Vah enforces this hard line about not interfering for a traumatized girl who was murdered, but as we're about to see, she's willing to risk the entire technology for Stewart's emotional well-being just a little later.
It really speaks to the deeply personal and often contradictory rules they applied to time travel.
It does. And Anne, shattered, she has to accept it. So she seeks closure through pilgrimage. Stewart drives her to Bun Hill Fields in the pouring rain.
And after searching, she finds it not a grand marker, but a worn, oblique lump of moss-green marble.
The inscription is devastatingly simple. Here lays the body of William McBurry, also Rose's daughter, 1818.
Anne finds a measure of peace there. She realizes the futility of it all, still wishes she could have fought harder, but the finality of the grave brings this strange quietude.
It's a profound realization that mastery over time grants you no immunity from moral failure.
And that lesson in ultimate consequence extends directly to the arc of Frankie, the group's infamous traitor.
Yes. Let's look at the price he paid for his betrayal and his tragic descent.
After his betrayal and banishment, Frankie's life just spiraled. He had to move into old Vah's rented house, an arrangement he hated. He'd sold his flat at a loss.
And after 20 years of living off lottery winnings and time travel, he had zero transferable skills for the modern job market.
So he gets a cleaning job at a McDonald's.
Yeah.
On a 0 hours contract.
Yeah.
And the details Molly provides about his decline are just excruciatingly specific.
He was gaining weight despite a low-calorie diet because of all the salt and sugar and the cheap food he was eating, which was often discarded leftovers.
He was routinely reprimanded by management for rummaging in the bins for rejected food. Just to survive, he was completely shunned by the younger employees. A miserable, solitary existence.
Deeply depressed, addicted to over-the-counter medicine, he seeks help at a counseling organization called GAZ. He pours his heart out to his therapist, Dr. Ballantyne.
But he keeps one secret.
The time travel. He explained later he felt it would be ridiculous and deeply disrespectful to the others in his therapy group who were suffering from, as he put it, life's real problems.
And Dr. Ballantyne helps Frankie confront the devastating realization that he alone was responsible for all of this. He had been given every chance by Stewart, and he'd squandered them.
He had dug his own square hole. And realizing he couldn't blame anyone but himself, well, that just cemented his despair. The pressure became unbearable.
The tragedy occurs when Frankie takes his own life, an overdose in rum. He's found by old Vah, pronounced dead at Mile End Hospital, and Stewart has to go and identify the body.
A moment of profound but very confusing grief for Stewart. He notes this strange detail about the policeman who delivered the news, focusing on his quiet, professional manner. It just speaks to his state of mind. He's clinging to these small, normal observations while dealing with this completely unnatural, avoidable death.
And the funeral itself was described as just bizarre.
Because everyone there who knew about the traveler felt that strange lightness, that knowledge that this death was temporary, could be undone in a few moments.
Yet Stewart is still consumed by grief. He couldn't shake the suspicion that Frankie had set up the suicide, maybe even subconsciously, to guilt him into a rescue.
And that suspicion, mixed with genuine grief, was enough. Stewart realized that for his own peace of mind, he had to save Frankie.
Which brings us to the paradoxical rescue and Vah's emotional bias.
Stewart finally approaches Vah, reveals his weeks of despair. And Vah, even though she still sees Frankie as a dangerous traitor, agrees. But only if they speak to him right before the act.
And they decide to lie to him.
Offer him unconditional forgiveness. So they travel back to that evening, intercept him near his gate. Stewart, overwhelmed, begins the lie.
Vah and I have decided that this bad blood can't go on. I forgive you, Frankie, unconditionally. And Vah backs him up, offering him a place back at the house before he can take the overdose.
Frankie, skeptical but broken, he accepts. He agrees to come back the next day.
But the temporal hiccup happens almost instantly.
It does. Out of sheer relief, Frankie calls Vah's house to thank her privately. George answers and confirms Vah is home, taking a shower.
Which proves to Frankie that they just did a time jump to save his life.
So the new Frankie, the one who never took the overdose, is brought back into 2035. And Stewart and Vah spent a month monitoring the timeline for any ripple effects.
And the sad, cruel irony.
They found absolutely nothing. Not a single historical record or a social nuance had changed. It proved how little impact Frankie's life, or his death, ultimately had on the world.
Which just reinforces the themes of insignificance that fueled his despair in the first place.
And now Vah is forced to continue this performance of forgiveness, a deception she finds harder and harder to maintain. But at least Frankie is alive.
The sheer risk Vah took, though, was monumental, especially since she was already deeply concerned about the traveler itself. This brings us to the final existential crisis.
The Jard's departure. This is where the story shifts from human drama to an extraterrestrial crisis. Vah was intensely preoccupied with the traveler, the gold badge containing the alien life form.
The Jard.
Right. Her understanding was limited. She knew they were microscopic, that travel was their natural state, and electricity was their food. But she had no manual. She couldn't tell if the traveler was just aging, or overworked, or sick.
The observations began in December 2034. The bath of mercury it sits in started vibrating, gently at first, but constantly.
It really alarmed her. Her breakthrough happened by accident while she was selling her gold powder at the bullion merchant.
She couldn't get her taxi to stop outside because of roadworks, a massive pile driver.
And inside the shop, she notices the counter is vibrating in sympathy with the pile driver's impacts. And that's the trigger.
Her lab is shielded from all external energy.
Exactly. So the traveler couldn't be vibrating in sympathy with anything outside. It had to be generating the signal. It was a conscious communication.
So Vah concludes it isn't sick, it's reaching maturity, it's calling out for company.
Or nookie, as George later suggests with his usual bluntness.
So the necessary action becomes terrifyingly clear.
Vah has to introduce her traveler to another Jard specimen, the only place and time to do that. Timus's secret inner sanctum on the 3rd floor of the Devil's Tower at High Cross Castle, around 1927.
When he was known to have 2 fresh Jard specimens, this is the riskiest proposition imaginable. They could run into their younger selves.
It was an extreme, life-altering risk. If they were seen, everything about the last 16 years could be erased. Stewart knew he had to go, purely as a lookout.
But before this high-stakes jump, Anne has one last personal moment of closure, requiring one final jump into the Tudor era.
Right. Anne had found genuine happiness with Rupert de Havilland. An Oxford PhD in history drives a £1 million red Toyota 2000 GT. And crucially, he already knew who Anne was.
Smithers sold him the information for £10,000.
Which freed Anne from the burden of lying. So, feeling psychologically strong, she wants ultimate closure with Henry VIII. She asks Vah to take her back so she can tell him what history thought of him.
Vah agrees. They travel to 1548, a year after his death, to see his remains. Anne finally confronts this fat monster she'd feared and hated for centuries, but
it's completely anticlimactic. She finds she can't speak her prepared words.
she just realizes he's pathetic, a dead, decaying man, and nothing she could say would matter. The closure came from realizing she was no longer his victim.
And the trip ends with Vah having to use her laser light to silently incapacitate an old woman who saw them. A quick, necessary temporal cleanup.
So with Anne healed, they prepare for the 1927 voyage. Stewart, aware of the risk, drafts and signs a sealed letter for Frankie and Sally just in case he doesn't return.
It injects a heavy sense of dread. The group drives down Stewart, Vah, Anne, George, and Rupert, who is fascinated but warned he can't travel.
Stewart and Vah use the bubble in viewing mode, full stealth, to creep into the Devil's Tower. They slip past groundskeepers and, critically, see the younger Vah, still undisfigured.
A confirmation that Stewart's earlier time jump to save her face had worked.
They reach the 3rd floor, Timus's sanctum, and they see the dish of mercury holding the 2 other travelers, one red, one blue.
Vah places her traveler next to them. And what happens next is described as both beautiful and terrifying. A resonating, pleasant sound fills the room.
All 3 travelers begin singing harmonically, vibrating intensely, a temporal alien conversation.
The Jard reunion. Stewart described the sound as musical. After a while, the singing fades, the vibrations stop, and the room falls silent.
But Vah is baffled. She realizes she knows no more than before. Was it social?
Yeah.
Sexual? An energy transfer?
She tests her traveler as soon as they get back. but the definitive result isn't confirmed until 3 days later.
And the revelation is absolute.
Vah confirms the vibrations have stopped permanently. But when she tried to generate a time bubble, it failed. The microscopic Jard were gone, released from their captivity.
Time travel is now impossible. The era of the time travelers is over.
Vah's theory is that the Jard, having been captured for centuries, sees the opportunity to coordinate their exit. Vah, surprisingly, feels a sense of relief that she helped free them.
And Stewart's reaction is the core insight into the cost of losing that power. He felt relief, but also this intense claustrophobia.
He says, "I was a king, and now I'm just a commoner like everybody else."
That feeling of claustrophobia is key, isn't it? He'd had the power to manipulate empires, to witness any moment, to undo his mistakes. Now he's just tethered
to one body, one moment, one future. A fitting end to their reign.
But before the dust even settled on that, the group had one final mind-bending paradox to resolve. Lily's request to save her father.
Yes. Lily, still mourning her past failures, demanded Vah keep her promise to take her back to save her father from dying in the Twin Towers on 9/11.
So Lily, carrying baby Sally, travels to September 2001, finds her family's flat, and is terrified upon seeing her younger, identical mother, Valerie.
She has to convince them without revealing everything. She proves she's clairvoyant, listing intensely private details about Valerie's life. It's enough to persuade her father, James, to cancel his trip. She saves his life.
But in doing so, she creates a catastrophic personal paradox.
Precisely. She's now in a timeline where her father is alive, but she, the 2035 Lily, has no history. So she has to leave. She creeps out, leaves baby Sally with her younger mother and her newly saved father.
She sacrifices her entire relationship with her child for her father's life.
She spends the next 34 years living as a ghost, renting a caravan, waiting for the original 2035 date to arrive so Vah can fix the mess.
34 years. An incredible sacrifice. She finally returns old with cataracts and asks Vah to solve the paradox. She wants Vah to prevent her from going back in the first place, to erase those 34 years of separation.
And Vah, having just lost the Jard, agrees to this one final resolution. She takes the older Lily back to the moments before her younger self was about to leave.
And the moment the older Lily intersects with the timeline where she didn't travel.
The older, separated Lily is just instantly gone, erased from existence.
And the younger Lily, the one who never left, is suddenly confronted by her adult daughter Sally, who she should never have seen at this age.
And Frankie, who is always the voice of the audience, just throws up his hands and asks, "Wait, where's the other younger Lily, the one you stopped going?" He can't reconcile it.
Vah's final explanation leans heavily on subjectivity and multiverse theory. She just argues their brains can't comprehend it. It's a matter of perspective. The current moment they perceive is perfectly normal.
George, ever the pragmatist, just agrees. And Vah reminds Frankie that his own mind already accepts these anomalies. He doesn't remember having pizza face, the disfigurement Stewart erased with an earlier jump.
The past is erased, the present is fixed, and the group just has to accept it.
So once the traveler is gone for good, what does this forced normalcy look like?
Well, they're thrust into a completely normal life, defined by mundane pursuits and the inevitability of aging.
Frankie, whose life was saved, uses his renewed allowance to enroll in interior decorating classes. He decorates his room in this stunning, if alarming, minimalistic gloss white style.
Stewart thought it looked more like a padded cell in an asylum.
Anne and Rupert remain seriously committed. Rupert handles the bizarre news about Anne being an android with remarkable calm. Anne is genuinely happy.
But mortality quickly reasserts itself. Lily, the one who is restored, dies peacefully in her sleep from a heart attack shortly after.
And crucially, Vah makes no offer to save her. There is no temporal intervention. The acceptance of death as a natural end reinforces their new reality.
The group, collectively, is fragmented. Stewart sinks into a depression, missing the power, but he and Frankie remain content as friends. They're all just growing older.
And you see the younger generation deliberately creating distance. Bonnie and Clifford, Stewart's twins, announced they're moving to Norfolk after their wedding, specifically to protect their own family from the complexities of the time travelers.
Which Stewart found upsetting.
Sarah's content, just pottering about.
Yep.
And then there's a final strange act of closure for Vah.
Old, insane Vah suffers a stroke.
And Vah, the alien, rushes to the scene, initially out of paranoia, but she ends up placing her older self in a high-quality nursing home and paying the fees, admitting surprisingly that she has partly forgiven her.
Which shocked everyone, revealing this final act of emotional maturation. And Molly,
She has fully recovered, awaiting Christmas with her family and collecting the notes that form this final 7th volume.
the irony is unavoidable, isn't it? After centuries of avoiding the normal, escaping death, manipulating time, they're forced back into a normal life.
Subject to death, aging, consequences, and the limits of modern technology. It is a profound, fitting, and deeply human end to their romp in time.
They mastered the temporal plane, but in the end, they were forced to surrender to the messy, complicated, and finite nature of humanity.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought, one Molly herself mentions. She notes the theoretical possibility of recovering a working traveler from the future, if the Rosie and guilt scenario ever occurs.
That brief, confusing glimpse of a future interaction on a beach they once saw.
With the Jard gone, time travel is impossible. The key to renewal is now outside their control. It's no longer in the past or the present, but only recoverable from a future they can't reach. It's the ultimate inversion of their power. Does the future they can no longer influence hold the only answer to the past they can no longer manipulate? It's a compelling question for you, the listener, to explore.